Where do we stand, John?
Well, the numbers have crept up just a bit. We're at 7.74%. They've now allocated, by the way, 5 additional delegates to Joe Biden. The prediction is that he'll get 25 coming out of this. And we've got, again, this is the Huffington Post numbers, Joe Biden's at 52.4. So once again, above 50%. Bernie at 16.7. He's actually gone down slightly. Tom Steyer at 11.1. Pete Buttigieg at 7.8. And Elizabeth Warren has now made it up to 7%. So the numbers are largely what they were before, but it might seem more impactful for Biden to take more than 50% of the vote. But I will say, in terms of how impactful it will be, that's going to be dependent a lot on how the media covers it. And I did see a tweet from Joe Scarborough who said, Bernie is getting crushed in the first primary state that reflects the Democratic Party as a whole. Now we've predicted that this state is going to be considered more important than all 3 of the first combined. I will say it's not a horrible point. South Carolina is definitely more reflective of the Democratic Party than Iowa and New Hampshire. But to say that Nevada isn't reflective at all of another big part of the Democratic Party is obviously opportunistic on the part of Joe Scarborough.
Additionally, because winning over Latino voters is going to be so important to the general election, because we saw that it was way more split between Hillary Clinton and Trump than we initially anticipated in the polling and based on policy and Trump's fear mongering. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, John.
No, it's okay. And look, both communities obviously very important and increasingly important to the party. I just think that, like, if Joe Scarborough also said the same thing about Nevada, and if you saw communications from him to that effect, feel free to send them in, then it would be perfectly fine to say what he's saying. But I just don't see that being the case with him. And I do think that we're about to experience 48 hours leading up to Super Tuesday of, the Bernie bubble has now burst. His support never expanded beyond whatever we said it was 2 years ago. I expect that those takes are probably going to be coming fast.
Well, I guess it all depends on, and there's the whether or not you get some kind of a bump from the proximity of dates from this until Super Tuesday, and also when people actually tend to make up their minds about who they're going to support. Because again, these numbers about what people were thinking in South Carolina before anything a vote was cast was fascinating to me. One of the other ones that stuck out was most South Carolina voters decided who to support this month. I mean, I guess, we're in the last extra day of this month, but within this month is when they decided who to vote for. So, I mean, the fact that Bloomberg came in about a month ago,
yes,
is kind of plays into his hand. Not that they would support him necessarily, but the fact that you can come in this late and still have enough of an effect that people haven't made up their minds at all, to the degree to which maybe they're not paying attention, or they're just like, I'm still trying to see where everyone settles in to see what happens. It kind of stuck out to me. So if it took them that long to get to that point, maybe something like this will sway people's thought processes for the next thing, especially when you get 3 days from today, tomorrow, and then Monday, speculating about how bad or good this could be for Biden, and then also how bad it could be for Bernie. I don't know how many minds it could change. I don't know, I'm stubborn. These things don't affect me that much. I have a reasoning for why I'm thinking something a certain way.
But you're thinking rationally.
Yes.
And a lot of times, people are not thinking rationally, it's emotional. Politics is an emotional game. We saw that with Trump. He appealed to fear and he appealed to nostalgia for a lot of white racists and people who feel disaffected by the current political system. But I really am thinking that Bernie Sanders is gonna win Texas and he's going to win California. And that is enough momentum to carry him. And that's only in a few days. So we'll see, obviously knock on wood, but when we're talking momentum, I just think it could be really short-lived for Biden. Biden is not gonna do well here in California for sure. And it seems insurmountable for Bernie Sanders with Warren in second and the fact that she's like flailing right now.
Yeah.
Can I give just one anecdote about his Biden's organizing in California? I mean, we talked about on the show, the New York Times talk about the Super Tuesday states, and they said that for California, he had one office in the state in East LA, and they sent people to an event that was going to happen there. And when they got there, the entire thing was locked up. Eventually someone came and they started, like a phone banking thing like you'd have at offices. Bernie's probably got it happening at like 30 offices right now in California. And they said that there were like 7 tables and there wasn't one person for every table doing the phone banking.
Oof.
And it was supposed to be full at the tables.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough,
LA.
and honestly, and that it makes you question that too, because I always talk about how endorsements, I don't know, again, personally, don't mean much to me. If the New York Times endorses someone on the editorial board, I'm not sure why I should listen to the New York Times editorial board over anything else that I've always thought before.
No one did.
Right? So maybe the ground game thing is beginning to change in this new technological age of 2020, that if you're seen and heard on the airwaves through text messages, and ads even are almost an old thing. If you see people talking about you enough on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, then maybe that sways more voters than actually going through ground game to do things.
Absolutely.
You know?
That, and also you have to consider at least how foot traffic works in Los Angeles and California. A lot of people are in their cars. They're not necessarily trying to interact with you. So, don't come up to me and ask for anything. You may have a problem, But I definitely think the way you reach people is through technology, through the phone, through Twitter, Instagram, and that's where you're able to really kind of solidify your base. Because, hey, I understand why Biden didn't even come here, because we don't want you here.
I mean, he's now campaigning in a lot of Super Tuesday states. How quickly we can forget that Biden is forgetting a lot of Super Tuesday states, and we just covered that on the main show. So I do think this is short-lived. I'm not trying to spin this, and I'm trying to be objective about it, because I don't want Biden to be the nominee, but I do think this is short-lived and not going to be representative of the other results that we're going to see on Tuesday.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. I'm always trying to be prepared for the changes in the way things happen, and it still perplexes me that he wouldn't have enough money. That would be the reason why Joe Biden to have enough of a grouping, or at least a ground game going on in enough states. I would think he'd have enough of money that's coming in from all these different groups.
There was reports that his donors have maxed out. There aren't enough donors that he's convinced. Buttigieg took a lot of them, a lot of high-flying, big money donors. They didn't believe in Biden because he's been fumbling over words and forgetting things, let's be honest here.
Yes.
And they don't have confidence in him. They've also maxed out. When you have a group of donors, they can't legally give the amount that they can't legally give more than a certain amount, and so they maxed out for Biden. And also the third prong of that is that there were reports that Biden's team was spending so much money on consulting and private jets and swanky hotels, so he had a lot less cash on hand initially in the process than people actually thought based on the money he'd raised, because he was spending it kind of wildly while Bernie Sanders and other candidates were putting it into ground game, specifically Bernie.
This sparked a thought for me when I think actually, Emma, you brought up Nevada and how, the fact that, and John as well, Joe Scarborough is potentially overlooking the voting bloc in Nevada and how you have to get the Latino vote, and how, I don't know if the percentages went for Trump last time around, but I grew up in a religious household. And my parents at one point were like, whoever's the religious candidate, that's it. Of course, there's like late 80s and early 90s. So it was like the religious vote, the religious vote, the religious vote. That almost seems to not really be getting much focus, at least in the Democratic primaries. Of course, Republicans will still push that, and maybe that's what, one of the things that Donald Trump was falsely playing the role of during the last cycle that got him some votes. But a lot of Latino voters are religious. They want someone who has this moral compass and believes in God, and there's a good strain of religious voters here. So I wonder. I mean, we don't see people ending things with prayer anymore.
No.
Like, it's out of the mainstream now, and how much that will affect as far as getting in Latino voters, or honestly any religious voters, black, white, Latino at all.
Well, studies show that fewer people are going to church and fewer people are really influenced by religion necessarily. And so I do understand that religion brings a sense of these core principles that you assume everyone follows. But unfortunately now, unfortunately and fortunately, we see with the advent of technology, we get to see that people aren't necessarily living the lives that they purport to be living. And so everything is being monitored, seen, and exposed. So, it just really, it'll set up some of these candidates for failure if they are to say they ascribe to these, religious principles, when real life will show you that they're not necessarily living exactly in juxtaposition.
About something that they've said before.
Yep.
You guys want to have fun for just a minute? Okay, let's whisper of a graphical dream. Okay, so this poll right here came out in the past 48 hours in California, and it is largely emblematic of the last couple of polls. I've got another one where the numbers are fairly similar. Bernie's at like 35%. So this is California. And right now you see the shifts over time over the past few months or so. And Bernie Sanders is now at 34%. Obviously, objectively, that's a great place to be in, especially in a state as big as California with over 400 delegates. But what's really important is Elizabeth Warren is at 17%, Mike Bloomberg at 12, Buttigieg 11, Biden 8, Amy Klobuchar 6. So this is really interesting, especially when you consider what we're seeing tonight and what is likely to happen as a result of it. So in large terms, not 100%, you have to pass 15% to get delegates. Now, some are allocated on a congressional district basis, so you can do well in a district but poor overall and still get a few. But largely, candidates have to get more than 15% in general to do well. In this poll, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are the only two candidates that would actually pass that threshold in a 400 delegate state. If Biden does get a big bump coming out of this, that's not gonna necessarily be enough to take him from 8% to 15. But it might give him 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 points. And where are those going to come from? Are they going to come from Bernie Sanders?
No.
Maybe 1, but probably not a lot. They're probably going to come from Mike Bloomberg and Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is on the cusp of dropping below the threshold to get delegates, and Mike Bloomberg isn't even there yet. He can't afford to give up 2 or 4 points. And so it's possible that the dream scenario in California, where he's the only person who gets delegates on a state level basis, might actually be more likely now as a result of Joe Biden winning in South Carolina.
The thing is too, kind of based on our conversations before, I could actually see a lot of people that were going to vote for Warren voting for Bernie, depending how things shake out here and they're not looking good. Just because everyone wants to back a winner, but then also too is it's like we want to do what's in the best interest of the nation, and so I could really see a lot of Warren people going for Bernie.
And to buttress that point, Twitter isn't real life. And when I go to Bernie and Warren events, there's way more crossover and respect between the two candidates than there is portrayed online. Oh. Because not everything is just, teams for voters. And what's nice about the progressive movement is it's way more policy-based, and that comes from being more informed and watching shows like this, I'd like to think, and thinking about things in a more nuanced way. And so I think that's encouraging, and I could see that happening. I could see that affecting Warren's chances here in California. But that's a crazy stat, John, that what if Bernie takes all of them?
I mean, it's probably unlikely.
Yes, I get it.
It's a dream, but we can at the very least whisper.
Right, and that's for states like California. And of course, we're focusing on California because we live here.
And because it has 400 delegates.
Yeah, that part too. Because I mean, this is the thing. We mentioned North Carolina, California, and Texas, generally for Super Tuesday. But I mean, for all those who haven't looked it up yet, if you look at all of them, Alabama, Arkansas, of course, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Virginia are on Super Tuesday. So yeah, California has all these delegates, but there's these other states too, and then which ones of these states maybe follows the lead, or at least has the same type of demographics or voter interest that South Carolina had, and where Joe Biden may be putting his finger, saying, "Hey, that's where I'm looking good." We already know he's liking North Carolina already. It's right
we're looking, he's staking it all in the Carolinas, and we're also just going to be looking at the South in general for Joe Biden. And the good news for Joe Biden is I don't really see any other candidates there having a significant chance. So Biden, like even Bernie, right? I don't see Bernie doing well in most of the southern states. So. Besides Texas, obviously, but that's a whole different thing. So we're gonna have to see, but I think Biden's gonna be staking a lot of his claim on just southern states and taking a significant amount of the delegates in those states.
Absolutely.
So this dream scenario that John was pushing, it might be actually necessary, considering some of the other states that are on board that day. So I just don't want people to forget about the rest of those other states. Because I mean, they're gonna play a role. There's a reason why they're voting, right? And I think it's easy to, from our point of view. I'm talking specifically because I was thinking, man, wait a second, what about the rest of these states? And generally the South, they're like, look, Alabama, Arkansas, obviously Texas, Virginia. So, they're all right around next door, and we'll see if they have the same thought process.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, Jayar. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.